Now, you may be familiar with the ancient Greek myth about Narcissus, this handsome young man who fell in love with his own image. That's, in case you don't know, that's our pastor, Father Simon. He's away this weekend, so I get to say and do what I want, right? Now, Narcissus was a very handsome young man who repeatedly spurned the advances of young women who fell for him. Eventually, one of these spurned women prayed to the gods that Narcissus himself would experience the pain of unrequited love. Now, her request was answered one day, in that Narcissus went to drink from a fountain and saw a lovely image peering back at him. He struggled to get close to it, to embrace it, to kiss it, but whenever he got close enough to touch it, the image disappeared. Now, Narcissus was so captivated, so enthralled by the image that he saw in the reflection of the water that he never left the fountain again. Narcissus eventually lost his appetite, even for food, and slowly withered and died from his obsessive preoccupation with himself. There once was a nymph named Narcissus who thought himself very delicious. So he stared like a fool at his face in the pool, and his folly today is still with us. I didn't write that. I can't take credit for it. I'd love to. His folly is still with us. The folly of vanity, and it's a danger for all of us. It's this, the danger of developing an obsessive preoccupation with ourselves, with our own self-image, with the way we appear or the way other people perceive us. Now, this is a challenge, I think, particularly in the culture in which we live, which celebrates, right, this cultivation of our own self-image. It celebrates this obsessive concern for how other people look at us or how we appear to them. Let me hit you with a couple stats real quick. This is crazy. The average person takes 450 selfies a year, right? Now catch this. At the current trends, the average millennial will take more than 25,000 selfies over the course of their lifetime. That's a lot of selfies. 25,000. Now the problem isn't selfies per se. Selfies are just a symptom of a deeper problem, that kind of the illness in the human heart. This disorder, this desire, this longing to cultivate this self-image and project it to others. This concern with how others perceive us. Now, in the Christian tradition, we have a word for this. We call it vanity, right? Vanity refers to excessive self-love, like in the case of Narcissus, who fell in love with himself. But it also can refer to an excessive desire to be loved, admired, recognized by others. So on the one hand, it may arise from an excessive self-love, or it may arise from insecurity. But both of those manifest as vanity. Now, it's not just selfies. There's all kinds of ways that vanity can rear its head. I'll give you an example. Just last week, okay, I was cooking dinner for the guys in my house, the priests that I live with. And let me tell you, I put on a spread that Gordon Ramsay would have been impressed by, okay? So I got home, and I worked all day in the afternoon, and I got dinner ready, and we sat down to eat, enjoy each other's company, like we do a few times a week. And as you would know, at most dinners, there's that golden moment that arrives sometime during dinner when everyone who deeply satisfied with dinner will turn to the chef and compliment them on their culinary skills. Now, that moment never arrived. And during dinner, I had this internal dialogue, and I thought to myself, well, how come they're not saying anything? Don't they appreciate the work that I did? Don't they appreciate the fact that I cooked dinner for them? Aren't they going to recognize me? Aren't they going to tell me how delicious dinner was? I mean, I slaved all afternoon, and not a single person is going to tell me how delicious this craft dinner is. And then I thought, man, is this what my mom felt like? All those years growing up? Poor mom. I see some moms nodding heads. Now, the truth is that I did cook dinner, and I had this interior dialogue, and the irony of it is that because I was thinking these things, I got so wrapped up in these thoughts that it kind of distanced me from dinner, from enjoying the company of the people that I was with. And then it occurred to me, like, did I cook dinner because I want recognition and approval of these people? Or did I do it out of love? Because serving is its own reward. And that's just one example of how vanity, this excessive need to be affirmed or approved by others, can sort of rob us of our a moment of happiness or just being present. Now, vanity can look all kinds of different ways. It can be a posturing for position, to show other people how gifted we are, how smart we are, how intelligent we are. And it's like the modern world has forgotten this basic wisdom that is so self-evident that even children on the playground understand it. You probably remember playing as kids on the playground, and someone would act selfishly or have a meltdown, and somebody would say to them, perhaps it was you, you know, the world doesn't revolve around you. You know what I would love? I'd love if Apple came out with a feature on their iPhones where after every selfie someone took, Siri would say, you know, the world doesn't revolve around you. That'd be great. I'm waiting for that one. Now, there are consequences to being overly concerned with the self, with how other people perceive us, about how we're projecting ourselves. I read this study that found that people who took selfies of themselves and then posted them online were more anxious and more insecure after they posted them than if they hadn't posted them at all. Now multiply that over 25,000 times over a person's lifetime. That's a lot of cumulative anxiety and insecurity. Like, these things don't actually make us happier. They rob us of our happiness. So what can we do about this inner narcissist that's always rearing its ugly head? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. And we're continuing our series called The Citizens of Heaven, right? Which is about our call to live in this world with heaven as our homeland. And so we've been juxtaposing or contrasting some of the ways that living in this world, the values, characteristics of citizens of this world versus citizens of heaven. Today, I want to contrast vanity and humility. Now, vanity isn't a new problem. It's been around for a long time, and Jesus certainly was witness to it in his own day. And in the gospel, Jesus watches some expressions of vanity around him. Now, he's at the house of a Pharisee for dinner. Just to give you a little cultural context, tables were shaped in a U, and depending on where you sat, signaled your social status to the other people present at dinner. The place of honor was sort of at the center of the U, and then in declining significance, the further you got away from that central position. Now, it would sometimes happen that you would have a dinner party and, somebody important would sit in a certain seat. And then later on, a more important person would come, and so that person would sit in the seat of the person who was there earlier and they'd have to move down to a lower spot. And you can imagine that might be a little bit embarrassing. Now, Jesus is watching it happen, that as people show up to this dinner, that they're all kind of posturing for position. They're trying to pick the seats of status to promote themselves, to show who's the most important and valuable and honored guest here at the dinner table. And as Jesus is observing this, he goes into teaching mode, and he gives some just really practical advice. He says, look guys, when you're invited to a party, just go and sit at the lowest place. And then your host may come and say to you, friend, move up higher. And then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Now, on one level, Jesus is just giving really practical advice. If you want to avoid that whole sort of embarrassment, just start at the low spot and your host may move you up. But on a deeper level, he's communicating the values of the kingdom of heaven. What he's saying is, look guys, people in this world, they will posture for position. They want to self-promote. They want other people to see how great they are, how smart they are, how intelligent they are, how beautiful they are, how talented they are. They want people to recognize them and affirm them. But in the kingdom of heaven, it is not so. In the kingdom of heaven, it is those who are seen as the least in the eyes of the world who are the greatest in the eyes of God. In the end, in the end, those in the kingdom of heaven, those who have exalted themselves in this world will be humbled. And in the end, those who humble themselves in this world will be exalted in the next. And so Jesus says, take the lowest place. In fact, race to the lowest place. Because at the lowest place, there is grace. It's kind of like this, water always runs downhill. And water tends to pool at the lowest points. And the same is true of God's grace. God is constantly pouring out his grace and his blessing and his love and his life, and it flows to the lowest place. And so while in this world people are at a race to the top, Jesus is saying, race to the bottom place. Grace flows downwards. Now we take the lowest place when we do the best job we can, even when nobody is looking. We take the best place when we spend more time being curious about other people and what they're doing and what they're interested in than we do just giving an update about all our latest accomplishments. We take the lowest place when we resist the urge to post the perfect selfie that shows how glamorous our life is, when it really isn't. And we take the lowest place when we do the job nobody else wants to do. One of the graces we receive when we really cultivate this gift of humility is that we actually begin to forget about ourselves altogether. Rick Warren says this: humility is not thinking less of yourself, it is thinking of yourself less. Now, when you think about it, just like that conversation I had at the dinner table when I was thinking about myself, and I actually began to lose the moment before me. And I couldn't just enjoy the company of those around me. The same is true. The more we forget about ourselves, the more freely we can give ourselves to the people around us. And humility helps us get there. There's grace in the lowest place. If you want to cultivate humility, there's this great prayer in the church. It's called the Litany of Humility. You can Google it. Litany of Humility. You could pray it every day if you wanted, if you really want a dose of humility. It'll help you get there. I want to finish with this story now. Several years ago, I got a sweet deal on some flights to Mexico, Playa del Carmen, which is sort of a beach resort town south of Cancun. And so I went with some friends, and one day we went down to the beach, and I noticed things, right? I'm a noticer. And so I noticed this guy and his girlfriend, and they were at the beach enjoying this beautiful, glorious day. And I watched this scene unfold before my eyes. Now, what happened was the girl would do some poses, and her boyfriend would take some photos. But not just like, a couple, like 75 or 80. And I watched as she would try different poses and pose this way and that way, and he would take some photos, and he'd be lying in the sand on his stomach and then in his side and turning, the camera, and then he'd go and show her the photos, and she would kind of shake her head disapprovingly, and then he'd go and do it over and over and over again. I watched this whole thing for 30 minutes, and it's quite amusing. But then something just kind of shifted in my heart, and I began to feel sad. And here's why. Because it occurred to me this young lady was trying so hard to project a kind of image to an invisible audience that was on the other side of that camera. And in doing so, she missed out on the approval of the most important person who was right in front of her. And as I was reflecting on this, I felt like the Lord began to speak to my heart. And I felt like he said, Alex, you do the very same thing. You're constantly performing for other people, constantly concerned what the people around you think about you. You want to be noticed, recognized, seen, approved, validated. And in doing that, you miss out on me. See, in the end, there's really only one person's opinion who matters. Jesus, who created us out of love, who called us forth into existence, who holds us in his hands and holds our lives in his hands. And he's the one who sees us when we labor in secret and nobody else notices. He's the one who sees our hearts when we take the lowest place. And he is the one who took the lowest place on the cross, who emptied himself totally and completely out of love in this ultimate act of humility out of love for us. And so, we take the lowest place. Those of us who are citizens of heaven, we actively choose the lowest place because we have an audience of one. And his name is Jesus.